Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast, brought to you by Rocket Agency. I'm your host, James Lawrence. Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast. I'm here today with Stuart Jaffray. Stuart, welcome back to the pod.
James, thank you for having me back. Repeat performance. Huh?
Well, that's it. You must have done something right.
Maybe.
We were talking off air that it's probably very easy for us to work out exactly when you were on the pod, given every episode is on the website and on Apple and Spotify, but I don't know. We think it was between 2 and 3 years ago.
Sometime between yesterday and then, I think is about right.
Sometime between yesterday and COVID. So I'll do a reintroduction. So Stuart is Managing Director of Green Hat, which is a specialist B2B marketing agency that works through the APAC region. As we touched on, Stuart's been on the pod before, and I was reading a report that Green Hat co-published last year. It's called the APAC B2B Buyer Journey Research Report. We'll have a link in the show notes to push you towards the Green Hat website to download it. We try at Rocket to put out our own research because it is really hard in Australia to get research that is done for the Australian market. This report's for APAC. A lot of the information I think we get as marketers in this country comes out of the US and Europe. So I think just by way of starting, maybe just the background to the report, what was the framework of putting it together? And then it might be good to jump into some of the key takeaways.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of the report, when you look at Green Hat as an agency, we have published research every year for the last 15. And we do that because, in our view, one of the key things we should be bringing to the table as an agency is insight into buyer behavior. And that's how we help to influence growth. So if we have a good understanding of the behavior of buying groups, we can help to influence that, right? So 2 years ago, we pivoted the research to partner with 6 Sense to bring this research into the APAC region. The great thing about the research for us is that we've now got, and you're right, it is incredibly robust. So you've got over 800 buyers in the APAC region who have participated in it. But not only do we have now 2 years of benchmark data, 6 Sense replicate this research in North America and EMEA as well. So we can then reference it against the other regions and we get a global aggregate number as well. The reality is across those regional differences, they don't make a huge amount of difference to a B2B marketer in terms of what their go-to-market strategy would look like.
Yeah, towards the end of the report, you compare the data to the different regions and it was interesting. There's some subtle differences, but not wholesale changes.
There are some subtle differences there. They don't make a material difference to your go-to-market plans, right? You're still dealing with very similar behaviors. That the journey that a buying group goes through may shorten by a month. You may have 1 or 2 extra people in the buying group, but it's not going to change your overarching strategy in terms of what you're going to do as a B2B marketer there.
Totally. I think it's probably one of the headline themes of the report is the song remains the same, but the rhythm has changed. Yeah. Just dig into the nuts and bolts of that.
Yeah, you're right on that. And there are just some certain points in B2B marketing that have always been a way, and we're seeing in the research, they still are. We break down the buying journey into 2 clear stages. The selection phase. So that's when the buying group is meeting and they form the buying party, they set their requirements, they shortlist vendors, they rank the vendors and they establish preference. That's the stage that happens before they actually reach out to sellers. Then you've got the validation phase, which is what happens once they start to talk to the prospective organizations that can help to solve with their solutions. The selection phase is still the longest part of the journey. And I think a lot of B2B marketers miss that the part before they actually reach out to sellers is still the longest part of the journey. That hasn't changed. The buying group is still constructed of a large number of people. That's how B2B buying works. It's committee-based decisions. The requirements are mostly set by that buying party before they reach out to sellers. It's over 80%. So I think the current number is 85% of buying groups will have set most of their requirements before they reach out. That hasn't changed.
Yep.
The buyers initiate first contact. So it's them calling sellers, not sellers calling them. That happens in 8 out of 10 occasions, right? So the majority of occasions in a buying journey, it is the buyers reaching out to sellers, not sellers reaching in. And the other thing that's not changed is that when the buyer makes first contact, so the very first call they make, in 8 out of 10 occasions, the first contact they make is with the eventual winner. Mm-hmm. So when you think about that, what's happened in terms of that? So if I go back to what I talked about there in terms of the selection phase, The buying party forms as a big group of people. I'll talk about a change actually. It has got smaller, but it's still a large group of people. They sit in a boardroom, they communicate online, they do all of those things to get to their set of requirements. So now they've decided exactly that there was a need, and now we've decided what it is that we actually need. They create their shortlist. 95% of the time, actually, the shortlist on day one of the buying group meeting, the winner will come from that shortlist. So 95% of occasions, they already knew who the successful vendor was on day one they met.
It's kind of hard to get this data for this market, and there's such a similar statistic. And I use it all the time. It's in a Harvard Business Review article, and it's particularly in B2B SaaS. And it talks about that, right? Which is if you're not on the list before they even reach out, you're not going to make the sale.
You're not going to make it, correct.
And it's such a powerful statistic or number or data point for marketers to have when they're trying to fight the battle internally.
I agree.
It's a great one.
This is the key part there, right? So when you look at those things in terms of those trends, those things that haven't changed, if you're not on that list on day one, you've got 5% chance of winning now.
Yeah.
And 5% of chance of winning, but there will be one or two of you in that group. So,
yeah, exactly.
So now you've got a 1%, 2% chance. So if you've not established brand preference earlier in the piece, then you can forget about it, right? And that's the part and I agree, critical part for marketers there, establishing brand familiarity, brand preference, so that when the buying group meet for the first time in the selection phase, you're on that list. And ideally, you're the number one. You are their preferred vendor on day one. Because again, when they reach out 8 out of 10 times, when they actually reach out to talk to sellers, the first person they call is the one that's going to ultimately win the business.
That's it. And that doesn't even take into account all the other benefits, right? Like the price premium that preferred vendor will be able to charge, and the speed to close, all those types of things. With the, how do you view that with then the interrelationship with demand gen? Because obviously we're having very similar conversations with our clients, right? Which is all around either educating marketers or marketers themselves know it. You're trying to educate other stakeholders, and brand has such a negative connotation outside of marketing, and it's like future demand, right? Future performance. What's the relationship there with that 80% stat on demand gen, and kind of how you see that the interrelationship between the two versus just fundamental brand activities?
Yeah, my point of view on that, and this is one that we push with our clients regularly. We'll sit down and take people through the research, and everyone nods their heads because, interestingly, all of our clients are also buying things as
exactly.
Like their businesses that buy things as well. So they say, yeah, that's right. That's how we buy things as well, right? So everyone agrees. And then we get to this sort of thorny topic of, but we need to create demand today and we need to create pipelines. But guys, we've just agreed.
Not how the world works.
That's not how it actually works, right? So Kerry Cunningham from 6 Sense, he wrote a fantastic piece of thought leadership and posted it on LinkedIn last week, where he actually says that B2B organizations just need to hold a mirror up to themselves and consider the way that you buy. And then once you've done that, think about that in terms of your go-to-market. So we have that conversation regularly. What that means and when we take that then, Jones, is to say that what you currently call demand generation is actually demand capture. All you are doing with your activity. So once people are in market, once they're shopping, we agree that it's too late because they've already built their preference, right? That's already been done. So all you're doing at that stage is capturing the details of accounts that are already in market today. And if you look through the way that the buying process works, your chances, unless you were number one, if you were number one already, then you've got a very good chance of winning that deal. But if you weren't, your chances of actually dislodging the preferences is very, very small. So that's not demand generation, that's demand capture. What you do before and what you've done to influence people prior to and during the selection phase, that's actually a genuine demand generation piece, right? And that is, and you're right, call it out, it's brand and it becomes a full topic. What we will then be looking at there, James, within that, and this is obviously pure play B2B for us, how much of your ICP, so your ideal customer profile, are you actually reaching? How much, and if you've built a tail off of your ICP, because you may have said, okay, I've got an ICP, let's say of, I don't know, 5,000 organizations, but our actual target account list is only 1,000 of them. So it may be that just the tail that you're going after there. So I've got my tail. What percentage of them am I reaching? What percentage of them am I then engaging with? How many am I moving through, for example, to high value content that I'm offering off of my site and tracking that over time? The point there is it takes time because the average buying journey it's 11 months. It's got shorter and we can talk about that shortly. but it is still a long journey.
That's
So
it.
the work that you've done this year, let's say, what month is it now? We're in February now. The work you are doing now in February of this year is going to provide a positive benefit to you in, let's say, March, April, May next year.
Yeah.
That's the medium-term view that the B2B marketers should do.
And as you said, 8 out of 10, they're basically initiated by the buyer, right? And that when they're ready, and it's whatever you're putting in, right? If you're putting in CRM or you're putting in a system to run your business, you're generally going to do it at a time that suits you, not when got some kind of sales-led opportunity. So,
and I think the other point there, James, that people miss is that once the procurement process has started, so that selection phase is part of the procurement process. This is 60% of the overall journey. You're often precluded from talking to vendors because the procurement team said, here is the process. We are not allowed until we reach this stage gate here. We will not be going out to talk to vendors. So even if the vendor does call, but you can't, and you are interested and you're part of that journey today, you can't talk to them.
You're saying the marketing works, Stuart?
I'm suggesting it might. Yes. That's good.
It's good. Yeah, some of those headline stats, I think like you've probably gone through them, but I think it's good just to pull them together. 95% of winning vendors were on the initial shortlist. 76% of the time, the vendor ranked first at the end of selection wins. And then in terms of speaking to that brand point, 70% of the shortlist is set on day one. So you're not even getting in there. Like demand gen at the pointy end, you're too late. 73% of shortlisted vendors had prior experience with the buyer. 88% of buyers had prior experience with the vendor they ultimately chose. And this is, I think, just so fascinating. 90% of the time, the chosen vendor was on the shortlist from the start.
Correct. And intuitively as well, when you look at those numbers, that makes absolute sense. We are dealing with buying groups that are experienced, right? So whether it is the technical leader, so it could be the head of IT, if it's a marketing procurement piece around selecting an agency, for example, it's the CMO. You've got procurement teams and CFOs that are on sort of 2, 3, 4 year procurement cycles, right? They've done this before. They've talked to these organizations before. They are aware of who is, they have a very good sort of high awareness of who's there in market. You have an opportunity once let's say there's a buying journey finishing today that you haven't been successful with. You do have an opportunity over the next sort of 3, 4 years to be positioning your brand to win next time around. But we've got to remember the buying party know what they're doing. They've done this thing, they've done this dance before, right? They know what they're doing.
It's good. I think it's really good to have the data for Australian marketers. I like that mirror analogy. We'll often sit there with our clients and it is, well, can we just go through the last 3 things that you guys procured as a business, right? CRM, and it's like you pick Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever it might be, because, when did you first hear of them and where did those brand touch points come from? Conferences and white papers. And it's not, we just did a Google search and we thought we'd buy CRM we'd never heard of,
It's interesting, isn't it? Because when I was consumer marketing and when I was head of marketing at BMW, the number of times I would say to my team, you are not the audience. You are not the buying audience, or you're not the consumer for the 7 Series, because you would have personal preferences that would start to roll through. I think in the B2B world, we need to change that narrative a little bit to say, okay, how does our organization procure things? Does our go-to-market actually match the way that we procure? Because it's pretty standard, this process that we all go through, particularly when you're talking about sort of high engagement, be professional services, into IT, telco, SaaS, etc. Highly engaged buying processes and journeys that are pretty well defined. Right?
Yeah, totally. That segues very nicely into the buying journey. The report itself, which hopefully most listeners will download, actually has a really nice kind of depiction of the buyer journey, kind of going through as a bit of a flow chart. But yeah, you touched on it earlier that you're going to talk around just that kind of, it's not an insignificant change year on year, I thought, to the...
There is, and the changes, and it's fun. When we present this, there's a quote that I always use that comes from Hemingway. It comes out of one of his was the book, The Sun Always Rises. And he says, how did you go bankrupt? 2 ways, gradually, then suddenly. And I look now at the changes that are happening and that we're seeing in behavior of the B2B buying group. So we've talked about the things that stayed the same, but what we're seeing, I think, is the accumulation of particularly 3 key points that I'll talk to that are causing changes that the B2B organizations need to adapt to. And those 3 are economic conditions, that we have a younger, let's call them a digital native buying group, and the impact of AI. Those three things are combining actually to cause some genuine change. When the research data first came back, because some of the changes that we saw were material, we went back with Sixth Sense went back and did some supplementary research, because we looked at it to say, oh my goodness, these changes that we've got, or this trend that we have seen that's been in place for years now, suddenly something's happened to it. Is there a flaw in the research? And when the supplementary research has validated the data points and actually given us much more sort of insight into what's actually happening there. So do you want to lean in now?
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by the buying cycle and the team structure. If we could talk to the findings there. And just to confirm, it was August, September, right? That the actual...
We were in market.
You're in market. So I think it's a really interesting, because we're 2025 at that point. Trump's been in office for however long, tariffs. So I think most marketers, it's not that long ago, right? That arc of the year. So I think it's really interesting to look at when the data was collected as well.
So you asked about constructs of the buying party. The first thing is it's got smaller. What we have seen happening over time is that the buying party has been getting progressively larger. So organizations becoming more risk averse, things are slowing down, more people are joining the buying parties. We shrunk by 2 people. So we've gone down to just under 11 people in the average buying group in this region.
Almost a 20% drop, right?
Yeah, it is. And that's significant. And it's further compounded by the fact that we've dropped from 8 out of 10 buying groups utilizing consultants to just over half. So there's 2 impacts there in terms of the overall size and number of people influenced in the journey. And that's really simple. That's economic conditions, right? And if you look around at any organization, and there's been so much talk about it in media as well, restructures, a lot of senior people out in market today, right? So you can see the impact of that in terms of the overall size of the buying group, the buying party. And I think it makes sense there, again, given based on the economic conditions, that the involvement in consultants is actually sort of being reduced there in some of these decisions as well.
And this is obviously very anecdotal, which it's dangerous, right? I found probably through last year, observing the type of work when we were involved in pitch processes and looking at onboarding clients and whatever else, and this is marketing services, right? So it's only one part of the B2B ecosystem. I found that we were more often than we previously had would have engagement from senior non-marketers. And I don't know if that's because there's more pressure, and I think there's absolutely more pressure on marketers in the last 12 months than there was the 12 months prior. So I kind of put that down to, we need to get this right. This money, the abundance isn't there, and you'd be getting senior C-suite outside of marketing probably putting their nose into things more than, but that, I'm at pains to say that's just a small sample size, but it was a feeling that I was getting through last year.
Everything we do is B2B. We will often see engagement from senior sales leaders, so CROs, as an example, in those processes, depending on the size of organization as well. You could be up to a sort of CEO level. So we do see that as well as an agency. But as the overall trend, group's getting smaller, right? So
smaller teams and a shorter sales cycle as well.
And a shorter cycle, we've gone from 13 months down to 11 months. So again, I mean, it's a 2-month gap, 2 months drop. It's statistically, that is significant. We saw this globally as well. Again, when you look at that based on economic conditions, it actually makes sense. You've got buying parties or buying groups that have been given a task, they've been given a budget. I think they're savvy enough to know that if that decision wasn't made in this sort of financial year or during this cycle, there's every chance that money doesn't exist anymore, right? So they are speeding up their process to get to decision in order to ensure that they can still deliver against that. So that's one part. The other part is, and I think this is fascinating, that over time, we have seen that when the buyer, and I said this earlier on, the buyer initiates the first contact, not the other way around, but that point of first contact has been getting later and later in the journey. And you look at that to say, okay, all of the information is available to us online. We've grown up being able to self-serve, but I'm going to talk to sales until they're absolutely ready. This year, that trend reversed. So the point of first contact became earlier. And when you compound that with the fact that the journey time has got shorter, buyers are actually reaching out to sellers a full 12 weeks earlier in the journey than they were in the previous year. And again, validated across the regions. We're seeing that in markets. And There's one really simple driver for that, and it's AI. We're talking about AI here now specifically because you're at the validation phase, right? So your buying group has gone through they've assembled, they've formed their requirements, they've selected a list of vendors, and they've preferenced them as well. All of those buying groups are under pressure from their organization to hit, let's call it their AI quota. There has to be AI inside of everything that we're procuring. Remember earlier on, I said we're dealing with a fairly experienced buying group as well. But they've never procured, for example, you mentioned CRM earlier on. They've procured CRM systems before, but have they procured a CRM system with a mandate or AI inside of that's going to drive additional benefit for my business? The answer to that is no. So in order to be able to understand the AI inside the solution that they are procuring, the only way to do it is actually to reach out to the organization. Because if you jump onto their website, they're still scrambling to get their content up, right? So it's not on their website. And if it is, often it is impenetrable, so they can't understand it. So again, the only way around that at the moment has been for the buying groups to reach out earlier and bring the sellers in earlier. We did, as part of the supplementary research around this was 60% of organizations that we spoke to said that they were bringing sales in earlier because they wanted to understand the AI inside. It didn't matter if it was tech, if it was professional services, if it was manufacturing equipment. And that table's actually in the report. It shows the difference, but it's not really that different across industries. So when they then come to want to understand the AI inside, they're looking at capability, they're looking at data privacy, they're looking at data security, they're looking at pricing. By the way, the answer on pricing is zero. I want it inside the solution so I can tell my CEO that I bought something that is AI enabled, but I want to pay more for it. And I also want training because I don't understand how to use it. And I don't want to pay for that either, by the way, but I want training on the AI that is inside this service or solution that I'm procuring. That's interesting, I think, for marketers, because you look at this, we're dealing with this with a large number of our clients. The pace of AI adoption within organizations in the product solutions that they're taking to market is significant, but the marketing engine is struggling to keep up with that and then provide genuine use cases of it that they can publish and put out on their websites and in their content engines, right? There's a huge opportunity for organizations there at the moment, but they're struggling to get there.
It's so fascinating. And that I think the whole AI arc of last year and people scrambling and what's real and what's not. And we probably haven't had a topic for the last decade that has put so much interest from non-marketers in organizations saying, hey, what are we doing? How does this work? And it's where's the hype end and where's the reality start? And it's really it's fascinating. I love having data around this, and 93% of APAC buyers use AI in the buying process. And
absolutely,
it's music to my ears because we know it. We see it in our clients' analytics data. We see it in where their referrals are coming. Like we looked at all of our client data aggregated from, I think, January 1, 2024 through end of June 2025. Referral data from AI, large language models, was 5.1 times more likely to convert than traffic from search engines. The research journey, and you guys had it as early to mid funnel as the way you referred to it, and I agree with that. It's happening, right? It is happening within large language models, mostly ChatGPT in Australia, increasingly in AI mode within Google. And it's a battleground, right? It is where people are finding the answers to questions that they once turned to Google, and they, increasingly are turning to Google AI. But things have changed, and brands have to appear there, right?
Absolutely. And again, it's a key message we're pushing out to our clients as well. If you said it's 94% of the buying parties are using LLMs during that selection phase. And the reality is not enough organizations at the moment have a robust GEO, AIO, whatever you want to call it, sort of strategy in place at the moment. We've built, as an agency, we built out a GEO tracker specifically for our clients, specifically for B2B as well, because I think some of the commercially available ones are too polluted B2C data at the moment. So they can see how they're showing up in those engines and where those engines are preferencing content from as well, which is really important, because once you understand that, you can actually start to influence it.
I do think our two organizations, I think we are doing good work, right? I think that there's a lot of organizations, because I think the SEO industry has done itself a disservice but kind of there's the sharks that are like, this is this whole new thing. Everything changes. But then you've got these stalwarts who are like, no, it's just SEO and it's just not true. The truth is in the middle.
I
And
agree.
there's a huge overlap with the types of things that you do to appear in large language models. But within SEO for years, we've had 1,000 levers. And for a particular client, you might be pulling very different levers to optimize within large language models versus Google. And so I think it is, regardless of whether it's Rocket or Green Hat or someone else, I think B2B marketers should be looking at a strategy for AI optimization. To your point, is it GEO or whatever else? Don't want to get a map rabbit
sympathy there for clients. It's another one for them to add in.
Yeah.
And it is, there's no more budget coming from this, right? So what am I going to compromise now elsewhere, or where am I going to take that from to be able to fund it? But it's important. It's critical, actually, because we know where this trend is going. Again, you go back to that understand big way quote and think about that in terms of what's going on here. Exactly the same, gradually, and then all of a sudden. And if you're not showing up today, I really worry about where you're going to be.
Totally.
Time,
I didn't think we'd be talking Hemingway, Stuart. I'm very impressed. You see, you're a dual threat. You're more than just a marketing guy. The next one is also is kind of a thing I love because it's real. And I love having data around it, which is the digital natives are here.
Yeah.
72% of buying teams are millennials and Gen Z born after 1980. And I don't think it totally speaks to this, but this concept of B2B has to be boring and everything's on LinkedIn and you have to speak in this super boring tone of voice. And shadow might be too strong a word, but I think it does disrupt heavily the notion of what a B2B buyer looks like.
Yeah, I agree completely. And we're seeing it ourselves in terms of who we're talking to through procurement processes we go through. We're seeing it as well with our clients when we're in, and we do a lot of work interviewing buying groups on behalf of our clients to better understand their individual sort of behaviors. And we're seeing a change in the people that we're interviewing now, right, as well in terms of that sort of demographic. And I think you're absolutely right to call out in terms of this sort of notion of in the past, sort of B2B boring, dense thought leadership papers that are largely impenetrable. The millennial Gen Z, they're not interested in that, right? And we know that they're not only are they digital natives, they're video natives as well. Yeah. That's how they've grown up consuming content, and that's how they want to consume content. So I think there it is incumbent on B2B organizations to be serving up content in that fashion. So video becomes much, much more important. They want transparency on the AI and the solutions. We just talked about that. It's critical, right? So they need to be able to understand that. And the other thing is that they are more averse to putting their details into Forms, right? And gating content. And this is a tough one for lots of organizations because they built their entire marketing engine, if you like, around this sort of false notion of MQLs. So freeing up your content and removing those forms becomes a really difficult one. But you know what? It actually works. And there are so many case studies that we have now that actually prove this. But it requires a lot of work on the client side as well, educationally, internally within marketing with the sales team, and then actually building out the capability to de-anonymize the traffic that you're getting, focusing on accounts, not focusing on individuals, etc. Right. So, and that takes time. So I appreciate that for a lot of B2B marketers, that's a hard one.
Yeah.
But again, you have to do it, right? It's just a job that's got to be done.
Totally. Atlassian was so ahead of their time with that, where they basically took a much more B2C approach to B2B marketing and not gating content. And I think probably intuitively understanding the concept of, like, let's call it long-term marketing rather than brand. You know, the idea that you get out there and people are smart enough to connect the dots themselves and build an impression of your brand and engage when the time's right?
Correct. Absolutely. And I mean, it's funny you referenced consumer there. We've just gone through Super Bowl. I don't think any of the ads that played in Super Bowl had a form in front of them before you saw them and invested in high value content, and they pushed it out and made noise about it.
It was, I did enjoy it. I looked at the Claude one, the Anthropic one, and I was completely obsessed with it. I thought it was incredible. Yeah. And then I saw some data out of the UK suggesting that it was one of the least effective / well-received Super Bowl ads they've had since they've been doing the tracking. And is it an example of us in the industry? You know what I mean? Like the way and just saying that the perception of AI within the general market is so different to our perception working in the industry. And I was like, yeah, fair point, but geez, I love them. By the way.
I agree with you completely. But maybe we live in an echo chamber there, James, because that's the one where you pick up any marketing publication, it's the first piece of content that's referenced. So
I suspect marketers are heavily guilty of living in an echo chamber of living within the inner suburbs of Sydney and Melbourne and purporting to represent the middle Australian. What are your, do you think you'll do the piece of research again?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a crucial part of the value that we add back to our clients, right? It helps us to genuinely be able to influence their go-to-market strategies, because it's all very well and good for us to be able to say, okay, intuitively, we understand this. We've got a piece of research that came out of the UK, Germany, the USA, wherever it is. But actually having an APAC lens on it and being able to give that to the marketers to distribute through their organizations becomes really, really powerful. We've spent a lot of time over the last 12, 18 months with the 2 years of the research, actually going back into client-side organizations and presenting the data, not just to marketing, but for the broader C-suite as well, right? So that's where it becomes really, really powerful.
That's awesome. I'm going to put you on the spot here. One question and then some rapid fire questions.
Yeah.
What's your big trend for this year? What do you think is going to happen when you do the data, or when you do the research again, or even something that's not in this one, but you just a feeling you have for 2026 for B2B marketing?
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of what I think is going to happen, that 60%, and I'm fascinated in this, so that in terms of the buying group reaching out to sellers earlier in the piece.
Yep.
I think that if I look at all of the trends that are in there, that is the one that maybe reverses, right? And we start to go back to this sort of notion of self-serve. Maybe we won't see it this year, but over the next 12 to 18 months, as organizations get better at articulating, let's say the AI inside their products and solution, and as buying groups get more educated around procuring products and solutions with the AI inside, they're not going to need to do that, right? So I think that we'll see that sort of start to turn around again. In terms of then the other big sort of trend, we're certainly seeing this as an agency now, ABM and account-based marketing. This region still lags behind the rest of the world. I mean, if you look at the latest stats that we have on this, around 50% of APAC marketers say they are genuinely deploying ABM. It's north of 75% in the US. All of the data points that we have here support the need for organizations to be running genuine account-based programs. And I think that message is getting through, because what we are seeing is a real uplift in the type of inquiry we're getting. If I did a sweep over our contact us forms from our website, it's the only form on our website, by the way, everything else is ungated, but you still got to have a form for people to contact you. But if I looked at that, the number one source of inquiry coming through to our agency now is ABM.
That's interesting.
Good. We've been talking to it for a very long time. We've been delivering against it for a long time. And I think it's been a really sort of hard one for them, because it requires organizational change as well. So I think we're getting there around that. And I think there's a lot of opportunity still in market for marketers there, leading the way and leading the charge around ABM in conjunction with their sales and CRO.
Couldn't agree more. Should we try a rapid fire to close out the
Go on then.
conversation? Okay, here we go.
Sit up straight.
Okay. One thing that CMOs should stop doing immediately.
Gating their content.
Excellent. One thing they should double down on to win the shortlist.
Brand.
Well, this answers the next question. Brand or demand, which matters more?
Yeah, brand, because it leads to demand. Yes, both, but brand leads to demand. You won't get demand without the other.
The most underestimated buyer in the buying group.
The most underestimated buyer in the buying group. Oh, last year, this isn't rapid fire now, right? I'm going to give you an answer.
You did well on the first ones. I'm okay for this one.
Last year, I would have said consultants, because if you looked at it there, 77% of buying groups were using consultants, but very rarely were B2B organizations actually communicating to them as part of the buying process. We're seeing that come off, but there's still over half of buying groups. So I think there's an opportunity within that. The other one is still, I think, too much of the content that is generated is for the technical, so the process buyer. And the technical / process buyer is typically not the ultimate decision maker. There's that notion that we've always had of the hidden buyers. Is your CFO, your CEO, your procurement, the people that actually sign the contracts, the ones that can put their signature on there. If they've never heard of your organization, I don't think they're going to sign off on it. So ensuring that we're building again affinity with them earlier on in the piece, so that when that contract comes over there on the table, oh yeah, Green Hat, I've heard of them. Best B2B marketing agency in the APAC region. I'm quite comfortable with you appointing them.
Yeah.
That's how it should work, right?
Yeah, it's a good one. And then one signal every revenue team should be tracking, but probably isn't.
Account engagement, because we're still focused and obsessed with the notion of an MQL, right? Account engagement it's not harder to measure. You just need the tech in place to be able to do it, right?
Mate, that was awesome. I love talking all things B2B marketing with yourself. It was great having you back on.
Likewise, thank you. I enjoyed that. So thanks for having me.